Hey everybody, thanks for clicking that thumbnail. Hope you enjoy the video. This video, I'm going to be looking at the history of the Montreal Canadiens. They turned 111 years old today, December 4th, and I'm going to look at the history. It's a two-part series. In this first part today, we're going to look at 1909 right up until 1963-64, and we will show events. I don't know who we is, it's just me here. I'm going to show you the events, players that came in, Stanley Cup Wins, stuff like that. That's what's listed on the board there. I will also tell you whose numbers were retired from this era, the Hockey Hall of Famers that were from this team, from this era, and the Stanley Cup victories that they had in this era. And before we get to that, if you are a Habs fan like I am, please subscribe, ring that notifications bell, and that's going to get you your daily fix of Blue, Blanc, Rouge right here at Talking Habs. And you can leave any comments you may have about this video in the comment section. Let's get right into it. So, like I said, on December 4th, 1909, industrialist Ambrose O'Brien founded it wouldn't come out, Le Club de Hockey Canadien. And that was in the newly formed National Hockey Association, so the NHA. That was before the NHL, obviously. So O'Brien financed the new team with the intent of transferring the ownership to Francophone sportsmen in Montreal as soon as he possibly could. The Montreal Canadiens were born, and they are, to this day, the oldest professional hockey franchise in the world. That's a great distinction. The Canadiens played their first game on January 5th, 1910. That was against the Ottawa Senators. They beat them 7-4, and in that game, Joe Malone scored 5 goals on his way to 44 goals for that season and the league lead. Let's see now. They also won their first Stanley Cup in the NHA. So when you hear the distinction that Montreal didn't really win 24 Stanley Cups in the NHL, they didn't. They won one in the NHA, and that was in 1916. It was against the Portland Rosebuds of the Pacific Coast Hockey League. So in those days, there were a bunch of leagues, I guess, in Canada. Each league, I should say Canada, in North America, each league would play, and there would be a champion, and the champion would challenge to to play for the Stanley Cup, and that's how they got the Stanley Cup winner. So in that season, it was the Portland Rosebuds and the Montreal Canadiens, and Montreal beat them. I didn't get in how many games, but they won. I think it was a 3-game series, but I'm not positive about that. So when they did change over to the NHL, that was in 1919, the first year they won their well, they didn't win the cup. They made it in the first year of the NHL to the Stanley Cup Finals against the Seattle Metropolitans, but the series was canceled due to the Spanish flu pandemic, and they canceled it after Game 5, so the deciding Game 6 got canceled. Apparently, all of Montreal's players were in the hospital with the flu, and at least one of the Seattle players was, and that guy was defenseman Joe Hall. He was a star defenseman. He had played for Montreal at some point in his career, and he never recovered, and he died from the Spanish flu. And one of the reasons they canceled it before he died, but everybody was sick. I think Montreal had no players left. They were all in the hospital. So the Stanley Cup was never awarded that season. The Canadiens landed, excuse me, my voice, landed their first superstar in the form of Howie Marens, and that was in the 1923-24 season, and he would play for the first time with Aurel Joliat. They were a very famous Habs duo. Never really another winger listed with them, but that was a very famous duo that they played together for many years. So Montreal won the league championship that year. So that championship of the league, that would be the NHL championship, versus Ottawa Senators. And then they would go on to beat the Calgary Tigers of the Western Canada Hockey League for the Stanley Cup. So like I said, leagues won, the championships won, the champions won, and then they challenged for the Stanley Cup. So it wasn't all from one league. It's kind of hard to get your head wrapped around because, we're so used to the way it is now, but it was really, really different back then. So if I seem confused, it is because I am confused about it. So yeah. So it was a best-of-3 series. Marens had 4 goals in the 2 games they needed to win, including a hat trick in Game 1 of that series. The Canadiens played the first ever game at the new Montreal Forum. That was on November 29th, 1924. Talked about it recently in a video. It was a 7-1 win over the Toronto St. Patrick's. Now they wouldn't take residence at the Forum till 1926, and then they would share the Montreal Forum with the Montreal Maroons until the 1938 season, when the Montreal Maroons folded. On December 8th, 1924, Montreal would play one of the 2 new teams in the league. I don't remember who the other team was, but that team would become their longest NHL rival, and it would also be the NHL's longest rivalry, and that's the Boston Bruins. So that was the first game ever with the Boston Bruins. It was the first regular season game, or NHL game in the U.S. for Montreal, and I don't know if it's for the league also or just for Montreal. And Montreal won 4-3 in a comeback victory at the Boston Arena. So not the Boston Garden, it was the Boston Arena. For the 1924-25 season, the Habs wore that, I think, are pretty awful, with the World Globe on it, the logo, and they shifted the Habs logo off to the shoulders. And I think it was a blue uniform, and I wouldn't... It was horrible. Let's see. Legendary Hall of Fame goalie George Vizina collapsed during the first game of the 1925-26 season and never played again. He was later diagnosed with tuberculosis, and he died in March of that year. The Vizina Trophy is named after him, of course. It was donated to the league by the Montreal Canadiens and was won, oddly enough, that first year by George Hainsworth, and he was the goalie that replaced Vizina with the Montreal Canadiens. Vizina was also inducted to the Hockey Hall of Fame in its very first year of existence, and that was 1945. In the 1927-28 season, Howie Marens was the first player to score 50-plus points in a season. Marens would become the first multiple Stanley Cup winning goal scorer in the 1930 finals, because he must have, I didn't write this, but he must have won got the game-winning goal, game-winning series winning goal in the 1924 series where they won, and I don't remember who it was against, and I'm not going to look it up here. So this was the 1930 finals. It was versus Boston, and then they became the first NHL team to repeat as champions, beating Chicago the next year in 5 games to win the 1931 Cup. The 1930s would not be a good decade for Montreal after winning the Cup in 1931. The team was almost sold and moved to Cleveland, Ohio in 1935, but local Montreal businessmen stepped in and bought the club and kept them in Montreal. After selling Howie Marens to the Blackhawks the year before, in 1934, to save money because they were in trouble, the Habs reacquired hip for the 1936-37 season on the insistence of new coach Cecil Hart. What they said was Marens was thrilled beyond belief to go back to Montreal, but it wouldn't turn out to be actually good for him. In January 1937, he was checked by Chicago's Earl Siebert, and he caught a skate oddly on the ice, and he broke his leg in 4 places. He died suddenly March 8th, so about 7 weeks later, of a coronary embolism, which that wasn't really known and diagnosed till many years later. I don't know how they figured that stuff out, but they figured out that's what it was. So it was kind of unknown what he died from at the time, but it was a coronary embolism, and he was still recovering in hospital when that happened, recovering from that broken leg. Aurel Joliat said Marens died of a broken heart after learning he would never play hockey again. And that's what they thought. I mean, literally, that's what we thought for many years. And I'm saying that we only discovered this, I think it only in the last 10 years or something, they discovered what he actually died of. And so we literally was kind of unknown, and that's what everyone thought he died of. Broken heart from the fact that he wouldn't play hockey again. So it's pretty sad, really. Let's see now. He was also, there were 50,000 fans that came To pay their last respects, they laid him out at center ice, and the fans kind of filed by his casket. 50,000 fans, a lot for that day. Marens also was the he was one of the first players elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame. And again, that was in 1945. The 1940s started no better, with Montreal having its worst season in years, winning only 10 games with a still worst ever in franchise history, .260 winning percentage. And I believe that was 1939-40 season. So they had a .260 winning percentage, which is god-awful. They only won 10 games, but I think they only played 40 or somewhere in the 40s. So that was that. The 40s also saw the arrival of Maurice Richard, so that was something good in the 40s. But remember, it didn't start better, but it got better during the 40s because of the arrival of Maurice Richard. So the Rocket arrived in 1942-43. I believe he only played something like 15 games that year. Didn't have much of an impact. I think he broke his leg. And their fortunes quickly turned around with a Stanley Cup win that next season, 1943-44, and again in 1945-46. And I believe that's when the Punchline was formed, because that was Toe Blake, Elmer Locke, and the Rocket. So, and in 1944-45, they lost in the finals, I do believe, and that was the season that the Rocket scored 50 goals in 50 games, and also the first ever player to score 50 goals in a season as well, which I read without having to read it. And that was only in his third season, so he was still a really young hockey player when that happened. So he was the first ever to accomplish that. He had also had a 5-goal, 3-assist, 8-point game versus Detroit, December 28th, 1945. And the reason I mention that, because if you watch the movie or you know anything about Richard, that was the day he moved. Him and his brother-in-law moved their whole apartment, him and his wife's apartment, upstairs. And if you know Montreal, that area that he moved to, the staircases are kind of windy like that. It was a difficult move. He did not want to play that night. The coach wouldn't let him back out, and he had literally his best night points-wise ever. So that's kind of interesting. The Canadiens' fortunes changed in 1946 when Frank Selke was hired as GM. So I say change because things were going good, but they would really change if they thought winning the Stanley Cup 2 out of the previous 3 seasons was something. Selke really made a difference. Let's see now. What did he do? Selke is credited with creating the most extensive farm system in the NHL and playing up the French aspect of the team in order to attract local French fans to the newly renovated Montreal Forum. He had the Montreal Forum renovated, and the Flying Frenchman and all that got played up really big because there weren't only French players on the team. There were some, but there weren't only. And that was to attract the local fans so they can fill up the newly renovated Forum. And he built a very extensive farm system across Canada. I don't know if into North America or not, but across Canada. And literally, they owned like basically every team. And they had their choice of players whenever they wanted them. So that system that he built was responsible for finding players that would populate the great teams of the 50s and 60s until the entry draft system took over at the end of the 60s. His farm system is credited with, let's see now, producing Hall of Famers like Jean Beliveau, Dickie Moore, Tom Johnson, Henri Richard, Ivan Cornway, and the list, et cetera, the list goes on and on. Beliveau arrived for the 1952-53 season. That's permanently arrived because he had played, I think in, was it 50? So 51, 52 a little bit, and I think 50, 51. He played very short stints with Montreal, and he didn't want to leave Quebec because they loved him there. He loved the fans, and he couldn't be coaxed. And apparently the Habs bought the league he was playing in and turned it professional. So that made him a professional player, and it coaxed him to Montreal. That's apparently the story. So And the Habs would make the finals every year from 1951 to 1960. So that's 10 seasons in a row, and they would win 5 consecutive Stanley Cups from 1956 to 1960. And they also won the Stanley Cup that first year, 1952-53 for Belleville. It was a decade dominated by Hall of Fame players and Stanley Cup victories, and would carry on through the 1960s and 70s. In March 1955, the Rocket received a match penalty for slashing Boston's Hal Laycoe and then punching the referee, who got in between the two players because he really wanted to fight with Laycoe, and the referee got in between and he just punched the referee. He was mad. He was tired of being pushed around because he's a French player and such a great goal scorer, and he was just abused on the ice, and he had basically had enough. And yeah, he couldn't get to Laycoe. He said, well, you're going to stand in my way, I'm punching you, and he punched him. And yeah, he got a match penalty. And let's see now, where was I? And he was subsequently suspended for the remainder of the season and the playoffs. Now, the fans did not like that. So league president Clarence Campbell, who issued the suspension, he was warned not to attend the next scheduled Habs game in Montreal, but he did so anyways, despite receiving death threats, mainly from Francophone fans accusing him of a French bias. He attended a March 17th game, so St. Patrick's Day. So, people were drinking. He did that anyways and was booed and pelted with eggs and fruit. An hour into the game, a fan lobbed a tear gas bomb near Campbell, and police had to evacuate the Forum. So on the way out, as the fans were leaving, there were fans and demonstrators outside already, and they overwhelmed the 250 police that were there, and they started the famous Richard Riots, or what do they call it in French? L'affaire Richard. So, the very famous Richard Riots, they just tore the place up. And 70 people were arrested, 37 injuries occurred, 50 stores were looted, and $100,000 in property damage. Now remember, it's $100,000 $1955, so it's a lot of money. The Rocket promised to come back the next year. He got on the radio the next day and he asked people, I think there was still rioting going on. He asked people to stop all this, and he promised to come back the next year and win the cup. And while they lost without Richard, they lost that 1955 cup, but he lived up to his promise because he led the Montreal Canadiens to not only the 1956 Stanley Cup, but the 57, 58, 59, and 1960 Stanley Cup as well. That's the only team ever to win 5 Stanley Cups in a row in the history of the NHL. So that's something. Hang on, got to switch pages. The 1955-56 was the first, this 1955-56 season, first of 5 cups in a row, was also the first for Coach Toe Blake. The legendary Coach Toe Blake. He was a rookie coach in that season. Richard would retire after the 1960 season, after the 5 cups in a row, and he would be elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame the year after, 1961, because the league waived the mandatory 3-year waiting period. They waived it for Richard because he was that special of a player. November 1st, 1959, we're just going to backtrack a little bit. Jacques Plante wears a mask in a game, and he becomes the first goalie to wear a functional non-leather mask because a goalie named, I want to say Clint. I can't remember his name. I have it in a video, so I have this in a video. So in like the 1930s, he wore a leather face mask that he wore for like a game or a period or two, and it was just not functional, and he stopped wearing it. But he was the actual first goalie to wear a face mask. But Plante was the first goalie in a game to wear a non-leather face mask. It was made of fiberglass that he invented. And what happened was he got hit in the face with a puck, and it required stitches, and he refused to go back out. He said he was tired of it. He was tired of getting hurt, tired of taking stitches, tired of all that stuff, when he could wear a mask that he was using in practice, but the coach and the GM did not want him to use it. They didn't believe face covering. They should block anything with the vision or whatever on the face for hockey players, and they wouldn't let him do it. But he wouldn't come out. They only carried one goalie in those days, so they had no choice but to let him wear it. He made a deal with Toe Blake that he would wear the mask until his face was healed from the stitches he had received that night. And that was 18 games. They went on an 18-game winning streak. But still, Blake made him take it off for the next game, and he lost. And I think after that, Blake reconsidered, and he wore the mask again the following game after that, and never stopped wearing the mask. And pretty soon after, goaltenders started wearing the mask, and that revolutionized goaltending for goalies, because that mask meant you're not as likely to get hurt getting a puck in the face. Okay, that's not exactly what I wrote here, but it'll do. The NHL instituted the entry draft in 1963, and that essentially ended Montreal's farm system dominance. The Canadiens were given the option, because before that, they could sign any player from their farm system, just sign them to contracts. You didn't have to draft. Now you had to draft them through this draft, and it changed everything for Montreal. So they were given the option to change. So if they didn't want, if they wanted to get the Quebec-born players, first option on them, they could give up their first round pick and instead take 2 Quebec-born or Quebec players before anybody else got a chance to pick. So their first round pick would be 2 players, and then they'd continue on like that. They only actually exercised this option twice. In 1968, where they actually only used it for one of the picks, and in 1969, where they used it for both picks. Between the 3 that they got got Reggie Houle and Marc Tardif, who never had played for Montreal, but he did go on to play for Quebec Nordiques, amongst other teams, I think. But yeah, so they picked those 2 guys. But so they never really used it, and all that talk that people had about, well, they had this special thing where they could pick Quebec players and nobody else could. It was only for 7 years, and they only used it twice to make 3 picks out of 4. I don't think it's something they abused, and I don't know. People make more of it than it actually was. So it was going to be the end of an era, because that signaled the 1963-64 season, and Frank Selke retired, and Sam Pollock came in to be the new GM, and that was really the start of a new era. And that'll be for part 2. I'm going to tell you now who were the guys that had their shirts retired, their sweaters, and they have a huge list. It's a huge list. That's all the Hall of Famers. I'll just read them out quickly. So retired numbers: number 1, Jacques Plante; number 2, Doug Harvey; number 3, Emile Butch Bouchard; number 4, Jean Beliveau; number 5, Boom Boom Geoffrion, and somebody else, but they're from the other era, so we'll mention him next. Number 7, Howie Marens; number 9, of course, The Rocket; number 12, Dickie Moore and Yvon Cournoyer; number 16, Henri Richard and Elmer Locke. So multiple for those 2 numbers. Hall of Famers: Howie Marens, Georges Vizina, Aurel Joliet, Newsy Lalonde, Joe Malone, Sprague Cleghorn, Herb Gardner, Silvio Mantha, Joe Hall. That's the guy, the defenseman that died in the Spanish flu pandemic. George Hainsworth, Maurice Richard, Reg Noble, Harry Cameron, Jimmy Gardner, Jack Laviolette, Didier Pitre, Bill Durnan, Babe Siebert, Marty Barry, Toe Blake, Emile Butch Bouchard, Elmer Locke, Ken Reardon, Roy Wardles, or Warders, Tom Johnson, Jean Beliveau, Bernie Geoffrion, Doug Harvey, Tommy Smith, Dickie Moore, Gordie Drillin, Jacques Plante, Henri Richard, Gump Worsley, Frank Mahovlich, Yvon Cournoyer, Bert Olmsted, Bud O'Connor, and Dick Duff. That's how many Hall of Famers came out of that era for the Montreal Canadiens. Stanley Cup wins 1916, that's before they got to the NHL. 1924 versus the Calgary Tigers. 1930 versus Boston Bruins. 31 versus the Chicago Blackhawks. 1941 against the Chicago Blackhawks. 1946 Boston Bruins. 1953 against Boston Bruins. And 1956 you know what? 1956, it was Detroit. 1957, I think was Boston or Chicago. 1958, same thing. And 1959 and 60 against Toronto. So I do know that. Oh, I have it here somewhere. I misplaced it. Okay, so yeah, that's it. That's the history, the early history, 1909 to 1963-64, the Montreal Canadiens. That's part one. Part two is coming up. If you like this video and my rambling and my raspy voice, I apologize. Give it a thumbs up. And if you have any comments, please leave them in the comment section. Let me know what you think. If I forgot stuff, I know I left stuff out. Let me know in the comment section how you feel about any of this, or add anything to this if you want. And if you're new to the channel or you haven't yet, please subscribe, ring that notifications bell, and that'll get you your daily fix of Bleu Blanc Rouge right here at Talkin' Habs. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please stay safe out there. Peace out, y'all. And after take number 25, I got this video in. Thanks, everybody. See you soon. Bye.